Welcome back to my classroom. This is Justin. Today I will be talking about purpose of psychological testing, principles of psychological testing, and what are the assumptions related to psychological testing, then stages in the skill administration, test administration. Okay. Now I'll start with what are the purposes of psychological testing. There are so many purposes for a psychological test. The most common purpose is classification. Classification and diagnosis, these two need little more elaborate discussion. So I'll be doing a detailed explanation of these two. And other common purpose of psychological testing are treatment planning. For example, if you want to know what kind of treatment has to be given, specifically what the severity of the problem has to be diagnosed for understood. So for that treatment planning, we need a kind of testing. Then we generally use for self-knowledge. Most of the people try to understand what are the skills they have. Aptitude test or interest tests are used for self-knowledge. Then another test like program evaluation. You have started a program and you need to know whether the program is effective program or not. For that program evaluation, we need psychological testing. And obviously for research, one of the very frequently, very commonly used application is research. Okay, now where we measure some variables and try to understand relationship between the variables or difference in the variable, basically like that. So we'll go to the details of the first and second element, that is classification. So classification is basically assigning a person to one category instead of another category. So how do we do that one? That's a classification kind of process. So there are different types of classification which has very smaller difference among them. I think that's very interesting to understand. So one of the very frequently used classification system is placement. So you need to place a person to a group based on his skills and needs. For example, an HR manager want to place his employee assistant to a HR planning development or some kind of training there. He may get some skills that he do not have. So the person will be assessing the skills of a person, the employee, and he may be assigning based on that. So based on needs and skills, a person is placed somewhere. Could be a very easy example for that one. So it's a placement, so categorizing a person to one group where he needs some kind of treatment, something like that. Okay, now the second category is basically screening. So screening is actually based on the keyword here is people with a special kind of characteristics. Maybe generally we say that some kind of abnormality. The term abnormality may not be good, but still keeping a person based on his special characteristics. For example, I may screen students for learning disability, so that I can help them with better strategies to learn. So that's a screening procedure. So the key here is categorizing persons, people with some kind of skills, special characteristics. And another one is certification, is another categorization procedure. So certification means whether the person possesses a skill or not possesses a skill, so that the person can continue with some activities. For example, hypnosis training. So the person is certified, passed or failed in kind of a program, so that we can say that the person is eligible to do some activity. So that's a certification. So that's another kind of classification. Almost all classification has a negative element, that is labeling. So if you classify a person to different categories, the people generally label them, or they themselves will label themselves. So there's a problem with the labeling, with the categorization always, but we cannot help it in a way, because it is a very important procedure to go ahead with the treatment or to do any kind of activities further. So that's why this categorizing is not a very simple term. It's a little complicated in terms of its differences. So basically all categorization what they do is dividing people to different categories or assigning people to different kind of categories. And the next one is diagnosis. So diagnosis has a very common kind of understanding that assigning a person based on some kind of classification system that we already have. For example, DSM or ICD-11, something like that. So DSM-5 or ICD-11, so like that. So we have a classification system. So we say that this person has this particular issue, abnormality, like that. So that's one part of classification. This is why I want to emphasize on the diagnosis element here. So diagnosis means not only classifying people based on the existing manuals or system, you need to give a detailed evaluation of what's the nature and cause. See that nature and source. See that nature and source of this abnormality. So without that, diagnosing will not be complete. So diagnosing as a purpose of psychological testing need these two kind of characteristics. Okay, now we'll go to the principles of assessment. So what are the common principles of assessment? We have objectivity. That's the first one. The last one is standardization. These two things go together actually. So if you try to make a test more standardized pattern, the objectivity most probably would be very high. So one of the objective of the standardization is to increase objectivity. Now, is it necessary that always this standardization will lead to a objectivity? No, not necessary. For example, some projective tests like TAT has a very clear-cut procedure, clear-cut standardized procedure, but still there's a possibility for subjectivity. So this objectivity may not be always an outcome of the standardized procedure, but generally likely to have a objectivity if you have a standardized procedure. But if you do not have a standardized procedure, if it is very clear that you won't have a objective kind of test. Now, other characteristics are like reliability, validity, that is consistency and extent to which to measure what it intended to measure, and norms. These are the general characteristics or principles of assessment. Now, we'll go to what are the assumptions of psychological testing. First two assumptions are very obvious. We have the common assumptions like reliability and validity. Then other assumptions are very interesting to know. The first assumption is all individuals who respond to the test understand or get a similar kind of understanding about the test item. That's very interesting thing. For example, if you ask a question like how impulsive you are, see a question like how impulsive you are. Everyone who read this sentence will get similar meaning, similar kind of understanding. Okay, their evaluation about themselves will be different, but the meaning that they get should be same. So the word impulsivity should be similar, should give same kind of meaning to all the respondents. I don't know how much we can achieve that, but this is one of the assumptions of psychological testing. See how difficult to get a good response from the people. Everybody may different people may understand this statement in different way. Now, other important assumption is every respondent have a ability to respond accurately his thoughts and emotions like that, feelings like that. See that we are not talking about honesty here. We are saying that whether the person has a capacity to respond accurately. See that whether the person has a capacity to respond accurately. The same question: are you an impulsive person? So whether the person really understand about his impulsiveness. For example, a person may feel that I am not an impulsive person, but he may be really an impulsive. Sometimes when somebody asks you, do you feel depressed? Then you will say like, no, I'm not. I'm okay. I don't have any problem. But he may be really feeling depressed. How well you know yourself? That's a very serious question. Only then they can respond accurately. So otherwise, the test will give you wrong kind of results. Very interesting element. The fifth one is about the honesty. Obviously, honesty is one of the common problem when you have in basically in terms of self-report questionnaires. So you get some question how honestly you respond to that question. We may have some kind of like people who may respond, give a wrong response to or socially desirable kind of response to different kind of questions, statements. Now, especially when you ask questions related to morality, something that may be embarrassing for them, so something that influences their prestige. So these kind of situations, there's a high chance that people will give you a socially desirable response. So honesty is a very important kind of part. So if a person do not give an honest response, definitely the test scores may not be appropriate. So another assumption is everybody give an honest response to the scale. I don't know how far we can rely on that particular kind of assumption. The last assumption here is the test result, the total score of the person will be same as a true score. So every response have a true score and a error score. That means if a same question is asked, are you an impulsive person? So morning the person may respond in a different way, maybe afternoon another different way, or 2 days after he may give a different response. Something like instead of 3 he may give 4 or 2 like that. Why these responses are coming? Because of some random fluctuation in different situations. We are not much aware about it. We call this as a measurement error. So this measurement error, we believe that based on classical test theory, we believe that this measurement error will be normally distributed. It is random, so that it will cancel each other. So at the end you get the total score, the true score itself. It's one of the assumptions based on the classical test theory. In modern test theory, we don't believe in that one, but still generally when you talk about assumptions of testing, this is one of the common assumptions we have. According to modern test theory, you can find out this the particular error. It is not necessary that this measurement error always need to be like zero, cancel each other, like that. Now, what are the stages of test administration? So one of the common very important stages of test administration is preparation from the part of the person who administers the test. So you should be very clear about what is the test, what are the instruction. You cannot just go there and read the sentences there and just give some instruction like that. Very clearly the person should be prepared for the test administration, primary part. the second stage of test administration is related to understanding the testing conditions. So the person should have a very clear-cut understanding about the testing conditions before conducting a test. For example, what noise or any other disturbances, any other characteristics that may influence the test scores, seating conditions, everything should be clear about the person. So once the person is ready with the material and the testing conditions is all constant or the way that he really want to be, then he can start the test. So before starting the test, rapport has to be built. So rapport and test taker's orientation, that has to be very clearly worked out. So how do you build the rapport? Why do we build the rapport? So it is not always just to soothe the person, to calm the person. In the condition of a test administration, psychological testing, there are three different purposes for rapport building in this context, okay, testing context. The first one is to develop interest in the person. The second one is to elicit the cooperation of the testee, and the third one is related to motivate the person to respond appropriately to meet the objective of the particular test. So these three criteria has to met in the rapport building procedure. So a proper orientation has to be given to the respondent, so that the test value can be trustable kind of value. Otherwise, you may get a different kind of, like if a person is not serious or not properly motivated or have some kind of doubt about the testing, then the person may not be responding properly. So rapport building has these kind of objectives, these specific kind of objectives to be met. Now, in the actual administration, something has to be very clearly focused on is there should be any kind of prestige related things, especially when you deal with the children. You should not test the prestige. Something like if you don't pass this particular test, you may not be qualified to sit in this classroom. Some people used to say like that. So that definitely influences the prestige of the people. So in that condition, the person may not be giving the real response. So to evaluate a person properly, these kind of elements has to be avoided. For example, surprise. So if you give some kind of surprise, people do not know what to respond. They will be a little confused in that context. So this gives you a kind of question like what should be the quality of a person who conduct the test? Who should administer a test? So there is a certification related issue. So in the context of India, there are a lot of complications, the rules related to laws related to this test administration, testing kind of thing. So I'm not going to that part. So theoretically, when you look at what are the quality of what are the characteristics the person should have to administer test, there's basically three characteristics that we generally deal with. One is in terms of the ability to select a appropriate test. So in this context, this test will be appropriate to work with. And the second one is to administer the test, ability to administer the test properly and do the scoring and make the interpretation. So these are the basic three skills when you talk about a qualified person to administer a test. Now we'll see what are the factors that influence the test performance. So one of the common factors that influence test performance is test anxiety. So that means a person is anxious about a kind of test. The person, definitely that will interfere with the performance of the person, especially when you deal with something which require a lot of cognitive kind of aspects. When I conducted some experiments, when the respondents asked to come to the lab itself, they will be tense. So I used to connect this GSR to do some kind of experiments. So what happens is whenever the person comes to the lab, the GSR response tend to be galvanic skin response to be very high. It's the anxiety of the person. So there could be different levels for this anxiety. One is the cognitive level, that is in terms of evaluation, what's going to happen like that, whether I would be able to perform properly, whether people will negatively evaluate me. That's a cognitive aspect of this test anxiety. Some affective aspect, emotional element related to that, interpretation of the physiological changes in the person. So that's another affective element. Even behavioral element also, if a person has a lot of anxiety, poor study habits would be there, or the procrastination is one of the common element if a person has test anxiety. Like that, there are three different aspects for test anxiety, both cognitive, affective and behavioral element. Another aspect that influences the performance in the test is malingering, that means lying or cheating kind of things will be very common in the social desirable kind of response people will give in the test, especially in paper pencil test where you try to assess, do a self-report kind of inventory. So malingering is a very common thing. Even cheating is another common kind of thing. So something related to this particular element is guessing. So especially in terms of test where you measure some kind of abilities, or multiple choice questions where one answer is right, you are measuring ability of the person. These contexts, there's a high chance that people go for a guessing. So guessing is very difficult thing to work with. A common way in which guessing is worked is based on negative marking. So there are some equations to calculate it. We will discuss in when you work with item difficulty and all. So when you give this negative marking, negative scores for the wrong response, this guessing is somehow, some level management can be done, but guessing is a little more complicated. So if you have 5 options in that, you may have some knowledge about it and you may eliminate 3 from that, and you have 2, and from that you may make a guess. So you do not have any options to work with this kind of guess work. Okay, so guessing is very difficult. Some people do correction, but still it's a very important aspect that influences the quality of a test score. Now, another aspect that definitely influences the testing is coaching. So there are so many coaching institutions that will give you some kind of training to respond, how to respond to each question. So for example, in the context of this short service scheme, military testing, when people ask for officers interview, there are so many organizations which train the people how to respond. Even there are organizations which help the person to how to respond, to understand, or how to respond to the TAT kind of material. So this kind of images you get, whatever maybe the kind of images you get, you need to respond in this pattern, like that. So there are so many people do this kind of training. So generally this kind of coaching will influence the performance of the person. Or some kind of intelligence test, people train them, pilot training, pilot aptitude test, some private organization train the people to like perform in a better way. See that? So coaching efforts is one of the threat to the people who do this test. So what can be done? One of the common term for this effect of this practice, sheer practice on the performance is called as test sophistication. So if you get a practice, your performance tend to increase. See that? You get a practice once, your performance, there's a high chance that your performance may increase. So what can be done in this context? So generally what people do is, will give a practice set for everyone. So a person without a coaching, with the coaching, if they come for the training program, they will get a testing program. Both of them will get some kind of practice hours, some practice hours. So it is believed, the research showed that the coaching effect and the practice given to them have almost some same kind of effect. So this can be managed somehow. So this the test sophistication can be managed with the practice trials. It's a common way in which people try to deal with this coaching effect. Okay, no, so this is end of this class. With the more details, we'll see you in the next class. Bye.